Good day, ladies and gentlemen. I am Jelaine A. Umanya, a third-year college of NUNESCO's taking of Bachelor of Library and Information Science. Thank you for this opportunity to discuss you all about the data collection technique. Data collection techniques. The information we gather come from in-job resources. Likewise, there are a variety of techniques used when they're gathering primary data.
The first method is called direct method. We may popularly know this as interview, which is normally a face-to-face conversation with the respondents. During interviews, the interviewer directly records not only the interviewer's responses to a set of questions, but also their behaviors such as their body language and tones.
Interviews can be structured or unstructured. Structured interviews are administered using a prepared set of questions. In terms of depth, it is surface level and it usually completed in a shorter period of time. One advantage, though, is its quality to let a researcher collect his or her data faster and more efficient. For unstructured interview, questions are not necessarily predetermined so that the interviewer has freedom to ask anything that comes to his or her mind. Because of lack structure, this kind of interview may be time-consuming.
Another method, called indirect method, utilizes questionnaires. These are commonly used for survey studies. A standardized set of questions are prepared, printed and administered to people of interest. Questions may range from fixed alternatives, like a multiple choice questions, Likert scale, and open-ended questions. Because questionnaires can be reproduced, administration of it can be done to larger group of people. This reduces the cost of a research because data is gathered simultaneously from several people as opposed to interviews as it is being limited to few people only. Moreover, data analysis is easier since the questionnaire is pre-structured according to the objectives of a research. However, because questionnaires are also simply given to the respondents, data gathered may be unreliable because of dishonesty. Also, items have chances of being left unanswered due to lack of interest. This is the reason why the researcher orients the respondents before giving them a questionnaire. Observation is another data collection method best suited for documenting the behaviors of a subject in an uncontrolled environment or controlled environment as for the case of laboratories. Through observation, the researcher examines a phenomenon while it occurs. One advantage of observation includes the directness of the data gathering process. The researcher does not have to ask people of their behavior or other variables under study. Data from observation also appears to be more superior compared to those that are gathered from an artificial environment or from experimentations. At the same time, through observation, non-verbal behaviors or those that the subjects are unconsciously aware of about themselves are captured. In the contrary, observation's main disadvantage is lack of control of the observer when data are affected by extraneous variables or those variables that are not included in the study but are affecting the subjects in some way.
Open-ended question. In general, when you develop a questionnaire, you will be seen at two types of question. Number one is open-ended and number two is closed-ended question. Open-ended question is a question like a subjective question in examination. Open question often start with the words such as how, what, why, and etc. In this open-ended question, we expect respondent to give whatever answer based on the opinion, experience. It's up for interviewers. If you are doing interview, then you must provide a sufficient time for the participant to respond to your question. As opposed to open-ended, we have a closed-ended question. A closed-ended question is similar to like a multiple-choice question in examination. It is offered a set of pre-designed replies such as yes or no, true or false, multiple-choice responses, or is given the opportunity to choose from a selection of numbers representing strength of feeling or aptitude. There are 5 differences between open-ended question and closed-ended question. The difference number 1 lies in the kind of answer what we get. An open-ended question requires the respondents to elaborate on their perspective. However, with closed-ended question, you get concise information. The difference number 2 is the kind of data that we get. That is textual versus numeric data. When you ask open-ended question, you get information from respondents in textual form. However, when you ask closed-ended question, you gather data from respondents. The difference number 3 in how questions are asked. Open-ended questions are explorative and usually start with how, why, where, and etc. For example, how do you describe this product? However, closed-ended questions usually start with how much, how often, and etc. For example, how often you go for grocery shopping in a week? Difference number 4 in the sample size. Open-ended question requires a smaller sample sizes to get a true understanding of the target concept. However, in closed-ended question, you need to study a larger sample size to reach an accurate generalized conclusion. The difference number 5 is data analysis. Open-ended question result in textual data which is then interpreted which takes a lot of time. Closed-ended questions are captured in numeric form which can be then easily analyzed and interpreted by using mathematician and statistical tools. Having been pre-tested, the questionnaire is ready to final editing before distribution. It is recommended that the title of the study or survey be placed at the top of the questionnaire. The question on each page should be arranged so that there is adequate white space among them and in the margin. Adequate lines or spaces should be left for responding to open-ended question. The general rule is that the questionnaire should be as short as possible in order to encourage complete responses, keeping in mind that a reasonable amount of white space is desirable. There are a variety of steps one can take to keep questionnaire length to a minimum. 1. While instruction must be clear, they also should be kept as brief as possible. 2. If the questionnaire is too mailed, the original questionnaire can be typed in a small font. 3. Relatively long questionnaire can be printed on both sides of the sheet in order to at least minimize the thickness of the instrument. In order to facilitate accurate essay response, the researcher should be strive for simplicity in word use and question construction. As much as possible, the questionnaires' response format should be consistent. For example, the respondent should be asked to circle the number or check the appropriate box throughout as much of the questionnaire as is appropriate. In most cases, a cover letter should accompany the questionnaire. The basic purpose of the cover letter is to explain briefly the purpose of the study and to stress the importance of each person's responding. There are 3 main methods of administering the survey questionnaire. The questionnaire can be self-administered, which means that the respondents are asked to complete the questionnaire themselves, administered face-to-face to respondents by researchers, or administered to respondents via the telephone by interviews. The self-administered questionnaire can be mailed or electronically transmitted via email or the web. Most researchers utilizing a mail questionnaire should expect to have to conduct 1 or more follow-up mailings in order to reach an adequate response rate. A second decision relating to the follow-up is whether another copy of the questionnaire should be included within the reminder letter. Once again, any devices that will have to increase the number of responses should be considered. Obviously, the more duplicate questionnaires mailed, the greater the cost for the researcher. Another important decision regarding follow-up mailings concerned whether to send them to all participants in the study or only to those who have not yet responded. In order to avoid sending follow-up questionnaires to all participants, one must maintain same sort of records of returns. The most common method of keeping track of who has returned his or her questionnaire, unless respondents are asked to write their names, is to code each questionnaire. What is electronic questionnaire? According to OECD Glossary of Statistical Terms, it contains questions are in a software system that can be answered by an individual. In the relatively recent past, surveys has been designed for participants to enter their responses directly into a computer. However, in the late 1980s and early 90s, email questionnaires were more often used because of the ease of transmission, the immediacy of the delivery, and the low cost of distribution. These early survey instruments were text-based and allowed for no interactivity. They were basically paper questionnaires delivered electronically, or as Picard stated, they are basically paper-based questionnaires that utilize a different distribution mechanism. Bertot states that there are three components to successful web surveys: a database, programming code, and interface. What is interview? An interview is a conversation for gathering information. Research interview involves an interview who coordinates the process of the conversation and asks questions, and an interviewee who responds to these questions. The basic steps in developing a standardized structured interview are not different from those for developing most other kinds of survey studies. One of the first steps must be developed of the list of questions to be asked, or the interview schedule. An additional step in the development of the interview involves the training of interviewers. Even if one is working with experienced interviewers, they need to become familiar with the researcher's particular questions. The same interviewer should be involved in the process as the final interview. There are some advantages of interview. In contrast to the mail or electronic questionnaire, the interview does have certain important advantages. Perhaps most important, it almost always produces better response rate. Apparently, the personal contact of the interview helps to encourage or put more pressure on persons to respond fully. There are some disadvantages of interview. As with other research methods and techniques, bias represents a real threat to the validity of interviews. The interview can be quite expensive in terms of travel and long-distance telephone costs. It is difficult to authenticate the responses in an internet interview, which necessitates taking steps to ensure that the appropriate person is participating in the interview. What is focus group interviews? The focus group is a group of interviews designed to explore in depth the feelings and beliefs people hold and to learn how these feelings shape overt behavior. They are called focus group because the discussion starts out broadly and gradually narrow down to the focus of the research. The focus group interview technique can be used as self-contained research method or in combination with other quantitative and qualitative research methods. Focus groups are useful for orienting oneself to a new field, developing ideas and concepts, or even generating hypotheses based on informants' insight. Evaluating different research sites or study population, developing and refining research instruments such as interview schedule and questionnaires, and getting participant interpretation of results from earlier studies. Focus group interviews has been used in academic, newspaper, hospital, public, and state libraries to gather information on users' perception on services and collections. There are two basic approaches to analyzing focus group data: the ethnographic summary and content analysis. The content analysis approach produces numerical description of the data. Content analysis is the tallying of mentions of very specific factors. Ethnographic involves establishing rapport, selecting research participants, transcribing observation and conversation, and keeping diaries. Although Gertz believes that none of these techniques or procedures adequately defines the venture, he believes ethnographic is defined by the kind of intellectual effort. It is an elaborate venture in thick description. Another important type of interview is the telephone interview. Because more and more interviews are being conducted over the telephone, this technique deserves special attention, like the researcher-administered question, the mail questionnaire, and the personal interview. Among the advantages of the telephone interview are the following. First, It tends to provide significant savings in actual and cost and contrast to the personal interview. Second, it can be conducted more quickly after an event has occurred. Third, it is generally easier to supervise, train, and monitor the staff for a telephone interview than for a personal interview. And lastly, telephone interviews lend themselves to a certain amount of computer assistant. CETI or computer-assisted telephone interviewing can build in skip patterns to expedite the interview process and thereby increase the surveys in time and money. One major of disadvantages of the telephone interview is that the process obviously favors those people who have the telephones. What is observational research?
Observational research or field research refers to observing the behaviors of people in their natural environment. The researcher observes the study participants in naturally occurring situations, such as studying how people act at a pop concert. Observational research is one of the ways we gather market information, which we subsequently analyze. For example, we can observe fans at a pop concert and then analyze their behavior. We can determine how many were happy with the ticket price, how many enjoyed the actual concert, and how many complained about the temperature. In the world of business, observational research occurs when we want to study how consumers interact with goods and services. It is only observational research if the participants are being watched in their natural surroundings. For example, observing people at a supermarket is observational research. Observational research may involve non-participant and participant observers. In non-participant observations, there is no intervention by the researchers. In participant observations, the researchers are also the participants. They mix in with the people that they are observing. Observational research offers the following advantages. It offers a real-world aspect to a hypothesis, and it can help round out research. It allows us to observe people acting together or separately. It validates actual results rather than having to use data to predict things. It is ideal in situations in which there is no verbal communication. And the data from this type of research is more reliable than self-report metrics.
What is usability testing? It is evaluating usability involved measuring the degree to which a user can successfully learn and use a system or service. Usability testing is the observation and analysis of users' behavior while they interact with a system or prototype. As I tie this topic, which is data collection technique, the questionnaire and interviews are frequently used for obtaining information about a person's perception, belief, attitude, and so on. As the internet has become more widely available and popular, it is being utilized to distribute questionnaires and conduct interviews. With the web survey, more attention has been focused on the role of the survey interviewer in an automated data collection environment. Throughout the design process, the researcher must be particularly careful not to introduce bias into the study. Finally, in selecting a specific technique, the researcher should weigh the various pros and cons of each method. That's the end of my video presentation. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you very much.